Welcome to another edition of the Aces Loaded podcast. My name is Zack Bayrouty. Thanks so much for being with us. Episode 6 of the Aces Loaded podcast. We are getting deep into it, and we have a great show lined up for you. My co-host this week is none other than Aces team photographer David Calvert, and we're going to be joined by Andy Young later in the show, Aces infielder and a member of the Diamondbacks 40-man roster. But we have David here right now, and how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. It's good to meet you, even if it's through these kind of weird times.
Yeah.
Hope to see you in Reno soon.
I was hoping we'd be well acquainted by now in person, being in the middle of May, but it's like we're not there yet. So how unnatural is it for you as a baseball photographer? The only one the Aces have ever had, by the way. So well seasoned baseball photographer. How unnatural is it for you not to be at the ballpark right now?
Yeah, that the first week in April around opening day was a little weird. Just kind of getting used to life at home. And it's not just baseball too. I miss soccer as well. I'm the 1868 team photographer. So really just being around the ballpark. I have a lot of friends that work with the organization. I miss the grounds crew. I miss the security guards. But it's a good group of people, and when it's back, it'll be great.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand that there's a certain rhythm to just being at the ballpark when you work in the game. And it's just, the way you come in every day and the people you see every day. And these are things you take for granted. And I think things that we're all missing. And even talking to some of the players, I mean, they have people at the ballpark outside of the actual guys on the field that they're used to interacting with. And to not have that, I think that's been what's been surprisingly tough for me, is to not be able to interact with those people like you and the front office people on the periphery that you just get used to seeing every day, right?
Yeah, when the guys talk about it after their career's over and you ask them what they miss, they always talk about they miss the clubhouse. And it's kind of the same for anyone who works at the team. You miss the people, you miss spending time at the park. For me, I miss an empty stadium. Like, one of my favorite things, and I don't want to dwell too much on the things that we're not experiencing, but one of the beautiful things about going to the ballpark as a photographer, being someone who works for the team, is you get to go there early and you get to see the stadium when they're watering the grass and it's empty before the guys are even out there, or when they're rolling out the net for batting practice. There's just something special about that. I mean, they talk about baseballs as these sort of cathedrals, modern day cathedrals. And that's what it feels like. It's a spiritual thing. It's beautiful.
I could totally vibe with that. And it's funny you say cathedrals, because that's usually my Sunday routine, is to go early when, Sunday's a bit of a different day at the ballpark. They'll have chapel, or they'll have guys arriving a little bit later. And as the broadcaster, just like yourself as a photographer, you can kind of go out and do your own thing and experience the ballpark in a more quiet setting, or go watch a bullpen and just hear sounds that you wouldn't normally hear on the everyday basis during the week. So I could totally get behind that sentiment. Totally.
Well, one of the things that's cool is, after 11 years, I've got a bit of a special parking spot at the ballpark. I hang out in the back with the grounds crew. So I drive in from along the Truckee River between the train tracks. There's a little gate back there, and it's just a little dirt lot. They store stuff back there, but it means that every time that I walk on or to the press box, I walk through center field. I walk on the grass, and I don't know, there's something cool about just walking out of that center field fence and seeing the field in front of you, and seeing downtown Reno and the skyline and all of that, and getting to step on the grass, because we got good turf.
Yeah, you're tugging at my heart right now, by the way, with these descriptions. I'm really missing it. So you've been with the Aces since their inception, right? How did you become the guy?
Yeah, so it started in 2008, actually, before they were the Aces, back when it was just sort of they were building the ballpark. I actually had an assignment for the New York Times business section. So I'm a freelance photographer in town. I have a background in photojournalism, so I do a lot of things like that. And the story was on the one of the then owner's partners, Stuart Katzoff. He's a New Yorker. His family's from New York, and the hometown paper was doing a feature on this guy who made good. And so I met him at the ballpark, and it was under construction, and the dugouts had just sort of been dug. And I took some portraits of Stuart and mentioned afterwards, I was like, I would really like to do more with you guys. And fast forward a few months, and they were looking for a team photographer, and Stuart was in a meeting. He was like, hey, what about that one kid? And that just kind of led to it. I heard a rumor that his mom framed the photo, or framed the front page of the business section and put it in his office. So he was looking at the picture and she liked it. And, you know, if mom likes your photography, then you're probably going to get a good shot at it. And I've been the team photographer ever since.
That's awesome. It's funny how we all kind of get into these spots where we are now, because there are a lot of people that want to aspire to do what you do, and to photograph baseball, which is something I want to get into right now. And it's the art of baseball photography. I've worked with and I've observed a bunch of photographers over the years. I think Megan Camino is a mutual friend. She photographs the Stockton ports and does a great job. And her base was kind of my office in the press box. So I'd see her set up and change lenses and all that, and kind of contemplate how she was going to shoot. Without getting too much into the hardware as far as the cameras and lenses, take us through some of the elements that you're looking for when you're shooting baseball.
Well, you know, to start with, I'm really inspired by the work that there's such a long history in the game. And so you have these famous photographers from the early days in the 20s, Charles Conlon, who kind of created this visual language of how we look at baseball. And then you progress through the Neil Leifer photos in the 50s and 60s for Sports Illustrated. And these are all things that I encourage people to, like, you know, spend some time and Google this stuff. And then there's a lot of really great modern day photographers. Brad Mangin in the Bay Area is a freelance photographer for Sports Illustrated and Major League Baseball photos, and he's someone who is a big influence on me. And then you got the guys, the team photographers in Colorado and Boston, and so you start to see all of this work that's out there, and you realize that, you know, there's some poetry to baseball photography. It's really about light and angles, and the game is slow. You know, there's a lot of time between action, but when it's moving, it's moving fast, and you have to know where to be, and you have to know where to look and to anticipate those things. And so, you know, I started by looking at a lot of photographers, and that's actually something that I recommend to my students when I'm teaching up at the university, is this idea of stealing like an artist. So for me, you know, my baseball, my understanding of baseball and the visuals of baseball comes from the past, just in a lot of ways, like, you know, it probably does for a lot of the players. You know, you're learning from a coach who may have played 20 years ago, who learned from a coach who may have played 20 years ago, and it just sort of gets passed down generationally. When I'm photographing a specific game, I'm always thinking about the game as a complete story. So even if it's, you know, game 47 randomly in the middle of the season, and I've photographed all of these guys a bunch of times, and there's really nothing new, there's always something new. There's always something that is, you know, the light is different that day. Maybe we've never played a game on March 13th at 105. Maybe all of our March 13th games have all been 705 games, so the light's going to look different on that one day, and that's special. Or maybe it's going to rain, and I'm going to make cool pictures of the rain that day. And then, you know, you transition into the game, and you're trying to catch those moments that tell the story of the game. So it's things like the fans, the pitcher, starting pitcher, the key offensive plays, just anything that creates the sort of atmosphere and sense of place that helps you with that narrative. Yeah.
When getting into, so there's a lot to shoot, right? You could shoot a wide shot of the stadium. You could shoot, like you were talking about, the rain or the sunset, the baseball sky. But when talking about actually shooting something on the field, are there keys that you're looking for to get that shot just right? Is there something in the framing? Is there something in something else that I'm not thinking of that makes that perfect shot on the field for you?
Yeah, so I'm always looking at light and background, quality of light, quantity of light. Directional lighting is really key with baseball. You know, as the sun sets, it kind of peeks through that the concourse and those little gaps in the stadium, and it creates interesting shadows. That's a big thing in baseball. You know, you think about watching postseason baseball, and you've got those pitchers that are in the shadows and the batters in the light, and it's you know, murder for the batters to try and pick up the ball, but it turns out to be really cool photos because there's all of this dramatic lighting. So those sorts of things, and then clean backgrounds or interesting backgrounds. One of the things, you know, having done this as long as I have, I remember when the stadium didn't have any advertising in the outfield, and you know, probably not the smartest business decision at the time, but man, did it look beautiful.
I bet.
And you know, even now, it's one of the things that we've been pretty good at, is making sure that we're trying to respect the playing field and make it visually interesting to look at. And you know, I like to work that video ribbon that we have in the scoreboard that's on our big wall in left field. work that into pictures. Sometimes I'll go up on the roof and shoot down. I'm looking at different angles. Sometimes I photograph from the stands. Anything that just sort of just makes it easier to focus on the play or my intention.
So I just to kind of drop this in. I've gotten, and I wish I could remember the specific Twitter handle or handles that have these photos, but have you checked out some of the old photos that they've gotten to be in color, like photos of the Polo Grounds in New York and photos of Ebbets Field, and these were like black and whites, and now they've been made into color. Have you gone back, and you seem to be a baseball history guy, but have you been able to go back and see some of those and to draw any kind of inspiration baseball wise from those old photos?
Oh yeah, especially the big wide photos, that creating that sense of place, like how you photograph the stadium. In the early 50s, Ebbets Field, great advertisements out there, just a
Yeah.
huge wall of ads. I mean, it looked like minor league baseball, your classic AA stadium, but it's Brooklyn and it's this great atmosphere. But one of the things that's really cool is in right field, there was a giant, I'm probably thinking maybe 80 feet by 30 feet Lord Calvert whiskey advertisement. So I'm very familiar with it. I don't know if people can see behind me, but this is I have a large collection of Calvert whiskey memorabilia, probably the
You
largest
really?
collection in Nevada. Yeah, there's some stuff back there. Over my shoulder,
Oh yeah, there it is.
back there, there's a mirror with Wilt Chamberlain holding up a Calvert whiskey bottle. So yeah, I know the old stadiums because I go and I look at them for those Calvert whiskey signs. And then, what's also cool is, and it's another one of those Twitter accounts that I don't remember the name of, but there's been a lot of video that's come out from those old parks where it's
Mhm.
just little snippets, kind of like the stuff you would see in the Ken Burns documentary or some of the other HBO stuff. It's just awesome to see those stadiums and to see the patterns in the grass, and it's cool to look through.
What's the key to capturing a genuine moment, be it a celebration, a disappointment? Because you can point and shoot your camera, but I imagine there's a lot more that goes into it. There has to be a sense of awareness and anticipation on your part, and a sense of, hey, I want this to be what it is genuinely and not get in the way. What's the key to capturing a walk off or a tough moment for a player in your mind?
Yeah, so a lot of situational awareness, understanding where we are in the game and what's happening, and is there a potential play at the plate? Is this a double play situation? Is this an important strikeout? Maybe you get a little reaction out of the pitcher. You don't see that as much in minor league baseball, especially the doldrums of summer. But knowing when you might see something is important, and being able to focus on that stuff. And then walk offs are always interesting because one of the things that you're looking for in sports photography, three things you're looking for in sports photography: action, reaction, and emotion. And the idea is that you can kind of combine all of those elements. You maybe create this Venn diagram, perfect picture, with potential for a walk-off or any kind of big celebration. You need to kind of come up with your plan. So you don't have time to be switching back and forth between cameras and lenses. You got to choose, like, all right, I'm shooting this one wide, or I'm using my telephoto lens, and I'm going to stand back, and this is where I want to be. And so sometimes I'm talking to the security guard saying, like, hey, I'm going to stand right here. So when everybody rushes, I need you to go like either immediately or wait a second, because I need to get this photo of the guy coming around third as he's about to jump into the dog pile at home. So it's just a lot of planning that goes into that sort of stuff. And then also, I think this happens more when I'm using like a wide angle lens or when I'm covering other things, but I'm paying attention to the background and sort of the x-axis and the y-axis, and I'm the z-axis, and I'm trying to move all of these things around to create this interesting composition. And intuitively, I'm just sort of feeling the moment. So I kind of know that something is happening as I'm looking through the viewfinder. But realistically, if you make that great photo, you didn't see it happen because that's when the shutter went off.
Mhm.
If you saw it through the viewfinder, you missed it. So it is a lot of intuition.
It's so amazing. I love, no matter the profession, talking to people like yourself and who have done it for a long time, become experts at it. And like anything else, like there's more to it than meets the eye. And I think people can look at photographers and sports photographers especially and say, well, they're sitting there and pointing and shooting and watching this game and they're going to capture something. But there's so much that goes into it that I appreciate what you and so many other photographers are able to do, and not only to manipulate the moment, but let it be and capture it honestly, which is really, really a phenomenal art. You do a
Yeah, and I
great
think
job. I love your photos.
I think one thing that you'll notice when you're at the ballpark, and I know our season ticket holders see it because I've become friends with a lot of them. I move around a lot. Like I'll start and maybe do an inning from the third base well, and then I'll go behind the plate, and then I'll do an inning from the third base well, and then maybe I'll go up on the roof, or just depending on the day and the light. And a lot of times I'm just chasing the light as it moves across the field. But I get bored if I stay in one place too long, and the photos start to look the same over and over again. So you're just always kind of looking ahead to see, who's up next inning, where are we at in the game? Is this the third time through the rotation, or third time through the order? Because if it is, we're probably going to see some action. It's the PCL. There's going to be some hits. So paying attention to all of that stuff.
All right, Dave, we're coming down the home stretch here in the intro. But before I let you go until the outro, I want to pick your brain on your top 5 favorite photographs that you've taken for the Aces, just kind of off the top of your head, and you don't have to be super specific, but you can just kind of touch on them and kind of frame them for us.
Yeah, so since I know we've got some people watching this and some people listening to it, I'm actually going to do a quick little sharing of the screen here on Zoom, just like I'm with my students. So every year I put together a kind of best of the season, and this is the 2019 season. I'm just going to quickly scroll. Here's a great one. Is this popping up here for you, Zach?
Yeah, it's the bridal party.
Yeah, so baseball is, especially minor league baseball, just kind of an interesting place to hang out. I saw these ladies in right field. They were having a good time watching the game, drinking some beers, and I just kind of kept that in the back of my head. I'm like, I know that they're going to walk around the stadium at some point. They've got to leave. So I introduced myself while I was out there, and I took a couple of pictures of them watching the game with the skyline in the background, and that was pretty cool. But I wanted something of them just sort of interacting with the ballpark. And so this is one of my favorite photos from last season, just because it's one of those things that shows sort of the kind of the fun, quirky piece of minor league baseball. And it's this bridal party. There's 3 women in the front, and they're walking by the concession stands over by the hot dog sausage cart. And they're looking out into the field, and I'm pretty sure someone in the stands gave them like a, hey, what's up? Or maybe even a cat call. And they're laughing and smiling at them. And it's just a fun moment. And that was one where, I was looking for this kind of all game. In the back of my mind, I'm just sort of seeing like, where are they at on the field? And can I make a cool picture? Let's go back to the gallery. Here's a photo from one of your recent guests on the podcast. This is John Duplantier. Did I pronounce his name correctly?
Duplantier.
Duplantier. All right.
Close.
So this is another one of those examples of just, there's nothing special about this photo from an action standpoint. This is a starting pitcher at the beginning of a game. It's not even that great a light at this point in the season, but that giant Archie inflatable that's in the background.
Framed so well.
So this was up for maybe 2 games with it in this position where you could actually see the face. And then they eventually moved it to the side. So what you have is this sort of interesting composition between our ace pitcher and one of the more iconic things in Aces baseball is this Archie inflatable bounce house. And it kind of reminds me of like San Francisco and the Coke bottle and the big glove, and Nashville has the big guitar. And so for a little while, this was our thing. And I made pictures of John, and I made pictures of Joey Crable, and that was about it, because they moved it to the side and put it in a slightly better location. But for me, this happened once, and it was really awesome. And I know you asked me for my favorite all-time Aces photos. I'm just going to show you some recent stuff.
Yeah.
This is a cool one for me because it'll never happen again. Like, this is one of those things where it's fleeting. And that's sort of the thing I love about baseball and what I love about photography is this idea that you can't really go back. It just sort of happened, and that was it. The moment's over.
That's awesome.
Let's jump back here. Let's go to the next page. If anyone's interested in looking at these, they're on my Twitter account, Calvert Photo, and I think we've shared them enough times that you've probably seen a bunch of them. So here's a cool black and white photo. This is on one of our Little League days. This is some kids walking around the field during the pregame parade, which is like the most minor league baseball thing. It's up there with a dog parade. I prefer the dog parade, but I
love the dog parade.
Yeah. And one of the things I always try to find in these situations. So this is this group of, 3 kids, and I think there's a little brother down there and a mom. But most of the time the teams are walking around and they're wearing like Oakland A's gear or St. Louis Cardinals gear, which doesn't do a lot for us from a marketing and branding standpoint. So I'm always looking for that one team, and this was the last team to go, and they were the Aces, and I just hung with them the whole time. And they're, you can see the one kid's kind of jostling to get in the photo, and one kid's not paying attention, and it's just it's a fun photo, and it feels very minor league baseball.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very cool. And then let's jump ahead here. So here's one of my all-time favorite Aces, Braden Shipley. I'm biased because he's a Nevada guy and I'm a Nevada guy, and Shipley spent a lot of time with us. He's our all-time wins leader. And so I got to know him pretty well. And this is one of his June starts. And this is an example of like, this light looked like this for 3 pitches. And I don't even have him pitching because I want that silhouette of his, you can see his beard, you can see his nose, the hat, the glove. Just that interesting, pretty baseball light with that nice dark background and a pretty good crowd. And one of my favorite players to play for the Aces. And then let's jump ahead.
I think we got one more in us.
Yeah.
Before we got to go to break. Boy, these are great. And if you're listening, you have to check out the video of this pod to see these photographs because they're awesome. And then we'll give you David's info and stuff so you can go check these out on your own.
So here's your from another guest from the last podcast, Kevin Crone, our big hitting first baseman. This is from Camp Lots of Fun Day, which is one of my favorite things that happens at the ballpark. It's a summer camp for developmentally
challenged
kids and adults. It's really all ages, which is one of the things that I think is cool about it. You've got some young teenagers, but then you also have some people in their 30s and 40s, and they come out to the ballpark every year and they get to play some ball on the field for about an hour, and the players are out there with them. And I believe that's Blake Swihart throwing a ball to him, former Red Sox, current Texas Ranger. And then you got Crone there, who is about to run the bases with this kid after he hits the ball. And it's one of the coolest things that happens at the ballpark. And it's honestly, it's one of the things I would miss the most if we didn't have baseball this season, is seeing the guys interact with these fans and seeing how much it means to the Camp Lots of Fun participants. To be there and to interact with the players, and their parents sit in the stands, and it's a really beautiful, emotional day. And so for me, this is a photo that's really tied to memory as much as anything. And that's one of the things that great photography does, is it sort of it triggers those emotions and it triggers those memories.
That's phenomenal, man. I can't wait to check out this catalog, and in the outro we'll have you give the place where fans can go and check out your work on their own and explore all these photos, because it's a great conduit to what we're missing right now. Just seeing you pull that up really kind of evoked all that baseball emotion in me. Thanks, Matt. Thank you for delving into that for us and the specifics and the elements of how you photograph baseball. It's fascinating to me, and we'll catch up with you in the outro, okay?
That's awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You got it, man. David Calvert. We'll take a break, come back, and we'll hear from Aces infielder Andy Young after this on the Aces Loaded podcast. He dives, and he does it again!
Goalie is set, and here comes the pitch. The Swiner is swung on, hit off the ground to third. Diving play by Harem, gets to his feet, throws to first, got him! On the ground, quick to the third. Vargas charging hard, tough chance, quick release, and got him!
Pitch on the way. Swinging a high drive, that's deep to left center field. Caesar going back, Caesar at the wall, and it is off the wall. Coming around third to score, the tying run is Pacheco, but out of the plate.
Barnes delivers home, gets a curveball and rips it to right. Snyder coming on, and he makes a diving catch in right field.
We are back on the Aces Loaded podcast, and our baseball interview this week is none other than Aces infielder Andy Young. 68 games with the Aces last season. Infielder, outfielder, utility. We'll talk about where you're going to fit in as far as defensively here coming up in a little bit. But the number 20 prospect named this year by Baseball America and the Diamondbacks system coming into the season. So how you doing, man? It's obviously been kind of an eventful offseason for you in a number of different ways, but are you hanging in there?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I think baseball players are pretty resilient in the fact that you can take what happens and kind of roll with it. That's kind of the sport we play. But, yeah, I'm hanging in here. I'm just trying to stay ready. You know, I'm doing everything I can. Still in Arizona, still working out with the team kind of as much as we can. But it's all right, you know, for the circumstances.
Talk about an eventful offseason. Obviously, this is happening right now with the COVID stuff and play being suspended. But as I mentioned, you were added to the 40-man roster in November. Obviously, it's a big step for a minor leaguer to be added to the 40-man. How exciting was it for you to hear that news, and were you expecting it?
I was extremely excited, and I thought I was expecting it because they told me at the end of the year, hey, we're going to add you, and all this stuff. I think that they kind of try to give you a good framework going into the off season. But then when it came down to it, the deadline, I think it was like 6 or 7, and I didn't get a call until like 5. So I was sweating a little bit there at the end, but I was extremely excited when it actually happened, you know.
You and I were talking a little bit before we actually came on, and there are a couple of interesting ways to look at this, and the way I was looking at it was, man, it's got to be tough for you to finally be on the 40-man and then to not have a season up until this point. The other glass half full kind of perspective is that, man, how fortunate you are to be on the 40-man and be part of that major league roster and not be on the minor league roster with the uncertainties right now. Can you kind of take us into your mindset as it pertains to that?
Yeah, so I've been looking at it. I've been trying to be optimistic, and I was in AA, I was in AAA, and I've never played a game in the big leagues. So a majority of my friends in baseball are minor league players. So when I talk to them and I see what they're going through, it's pretty easy to be happy with my situation. Not happy, but much less frustrated than I could be, because they're not going to get a season and they'll likely not play. So they're looking at jobs that they haven't had to look at. So I think that if you look at it that way, I'm pretty lucky to be under the Major League Baseball umbrella.
You also have had a ton of momentum, I would say, coming into camp in 2020, based on your performance last year and even going back to when you were drafted, which I want to get into. You've been a consistent performer. How hard is it from the standpoint of now you have to have this break? You've been off for a while. I'm assuming you're doing whatever you can to stay in shape and to stay dialed in. But how tough is it to just have to shut it down right now?
It's really hard because everyone was ready. I was seeing the ball well. I think a lot of hitters were. The defense was coming. Everything was going. I was pretty certain I was going to go to Reno, and then I'm very comfortable there. I liked it there. I mean, the team, it was just a good feeling. Everyone kind of knew what was going on, especially my second year at the organization. So it was definitely tough to shut it down, but now I'm just looking at it as like the off season, so everything that I did this off season to get myself ready for the spring and this season, I'm going to go back to and continue to do. And I'm kind of looking at it as an opportunity to get better, when a lot of people maybe can look at it as I was ready and now I'm not. Hopefully I'm flipping it back to off-season work. Let's get back to whenever spring training is, because it doesn't really matter. You can just go back to the off-season program and get it going again.
I was going to say, did you get a sense of in camp where you'd be assigned? You just said Reno. I was assuming Reno too, just based on the history. But did you get that sense before everything got shut down?
Yeah, I think so. I was actually optioned, I think, like the day before everything was shut down. So I was pretty certain I was going to go to Reno.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that pretty much seals the deal.
Yeah.
By the way, what are you doing to stay in shape right now? What are you doing to stay ready to hit? Like, staying in shape is one thing, and then staying on top of what it takes to be a consistent hitter is another thing. What are you doing for both of those?
Yeah, so fortunately, baseball players are really close-knit, and I've been fortunate to meet a bunch of guys in the Arizona area now because it's my second year. I'm close with a lot of guys in the Diamondbacks organization, and one of my friends actually owns a hitting facility, so we've been going in there with a bunch of guys and hitting and kind of doing the same things I would be doing if it was in season, doing my routine, doing my machine work and stuff like that. So swing feels good. I'm doing everything I would be doing. So that's really nice, you know, and it's fortunate too, because I feel like a lot of people are really struggling to find spots.
Yeah, it's amazing. The guys that I've talked to, some like we talked to John Duplantier and to Kevin Crone last week, and they've been able to kind of get their work in. But I've talked to some guys that it's been a struggle just to find facilities, and that's big time that you have that hitting facility you could go to.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about your path here for a little bit. 37th round out of Indiana State. The Cardinals drafted you. You, of course, were part of the Paul Goldschmidt trade. Goldschmidt goes to St. Louis, and you, along with Carson Kelly and Luke Weaver, are sent to the D-backs. This happened in the offseason before 2019. First of all, going to the trade, what were your thoughts right when that trade happened?
Oh, man, that's kind of a crazy story if you've never heard it. I was sitting out actually in a deer stand in North Dakota. The off season was happening, and I had a call from
deer stand.
Yeah, deer stand. I was bow hunting. And
okay.
And it was snowing, and I got a call from a number I didn't have. And by the time I got to my phone, I couldn't get to it. And I was like, it's all right. I'll catch him later. And then I got a text, and this is Mike Gersh, which is the GM of the Cardinals. And I was like, well, I don't talk to, being a AA player, I don't talk to Mike Gersh that often, so I should probably take this. So I started walking back to my truck, and by this time I was starting to get texts, and my agent called me, so you're getting traded and all of this stuff. So I was like, man, this is kind of crazy. And I finally get back to my truck, and I call him back, and he's like, we're not going to tell you who it's for, but your trade to Arizona. Thank you for everything and everything. So it's kind of cool. I mean, obviously I didn't know who it was for right away. And then when later on the Goldschmidt piece came out, then it was like, wow, it's all over ESPN. And I mean, just being connected to his name is pretty cool, because he's, I mean, not only a great baseball player, I mean, he really affects the community in a great way. So that was awesome. But then another funny part of that story is, so I'm getting all these texts when it comes out that it's Goldschmidt, and then my buddy I was hunting with, he called me and he's like, hey man, I just shot a buck. And I was like, oh wow. So it's like, he's like, I need help finding it. And I'm trying to do interviews with, like, you know, Sirius XM, and all these people are calling me, and they're like, hey, what are you thinking? And it's like, I'm doing this as I'm driving my truck through a field as it's snowing in the pitch dark, looking for my friend and his deer. So it was just a wild night, but kind of a cool story.
That's insane. That is a really cool story.
Yeah.
You know, I've talked to a lot of guys that have been traded and guys that have been traded for high-level major leaguers, and there are a couple of different ways to look at being traded. I think the positive way, you talk about looking at things glass half full, is that, hey, I was a big piece of a trade involving a perennial all-star in Paul Goldschmidt. How did it make you feel that you were traded for that caliber of a player, and obviously valued by the Diamondbacks? They wanted to get you.
Yeah, I've always tried to be a glass half full guy. So being connected to his name was awesome. Being wanted by the Diamondbacks was awesome. I saw a lot of opportunities in the organization. So immediately when I was traded, I switched everything to the opportunity and being connected to his name. So, I mean, that was just how I've been looking at it from day one. So it's cool, you know.
The other crazy part of this is, I mean, going back to where you were drafted, 37th round out of Indiana State. I mean, you were a guy that fell pretty far in the draft, but you burst onto the scene right after you got drafted. You had 284 in 58 games in the Midwest League with Peoria. How much did it help you mentally to have that type of success right out of the gate?
A lot, you know, and the year before that, when I actually started in the GCL. So being a senior sign that starts in the GCL, the bottom of the barrel is pretty rare. So I was with some younger kids. So that was pretty eye-opening to kind of see how they valued me right away. And then I played pretty well there. And then I got to go to State College with Tommy Edman and kind of that core group of guys in my draft class. So then it's like, all right, I'm getting closer, you know, I'm getting closer. And then we actually won the New York Penn League, and I was in the middle of the lineup, and I kind of felt like I belonged there. So the year after, when they sent me to Peoria with that same group, then I was like, all right, we're back on track. Where you got drafted doesn't matter. Okay, you're with these kids that are first, second, third rounders from your year and the year behind you. So it's like they value you enough to give you these at bats. So once I went to Peoria that year, I kind of figured that the round didn't matter anymore because they're giving me at bats, you know. So that's kind of how I looked at that.
Is there a little bit of a chip on your shoulder coming out of college?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think everyone has one, you know. I think it started way before I was drafted, but I think it was just kind of you get to a level and you see what you can do and you see how the players line up and you're like, all right, I can do this. You know, it doesn't matter where you're from, being from North Dakota or being a 37th round pick, you just get there and you're like, all right, I think we can play with these kids. And then you just kind of keep that from JUCO to Division I to rookie to AAA, you know, and I don't think it changes that much.
By the way, being from North Dakota, which is kind of obscure in terms of the baseball hotspots, is there somebody that you looked up to? I mean, I think Travis Hafner comes to my mind as a prominent player from North Dakota. Is he the one, or are there other players from North Dakota that you kind of jived with growing up?
He definitely was one of them, but I think the biggest one for me was probably Darren Erstead.
Good one.
So my dad is from Jamestown, which is the same town Darren's from, and he actually coached him. My dad coached Darren in high school, so we had kind of a cool connection there, and we'd come down to Tempe every year and watch him. So that was just awesome. I wanted to come down to Arizona. I wanted to play for the Angels. I wanted to do all that stuff, you know, because I was a younger kid, and so he was probably one of the top guys for me.
Totally. That's a great pull right there.
Yeah.
So you follow up your 2017 and in 2018, you proved 2017 was not a fluke. 12 home runs in Palm Beach, and you hit 276. Now, I'm very familiar with the Florida State League. It's where I started my career, and that is a very pitcher-friendly league. I mean, that's the furthest thing from the PCL, but you hit 12 home runs, the 276 average. You get promoted to Springfield. You hit 319 with AA Springfield. What was your key to staying consistent while transitioning from college to the pros and having that kind of a sense that you did? Because it's not easy. I've seen guys go up and down.
Yeah. So I think that I think the level of play between college and AA is obviously a massive jump. So I think that I did a good job of learning how to hit, because in college I was just swinging, almost kind of like the throwing and pitching argument. I think in college I was just swinging and it worked well enough, but at some point, if you don't change in baseball and adapt to what's going on, I think that you'll really struggle. So I had a few coaches that really helped me along the way and kind of taught me the sequencing and the biomechanics of hitting, which I have never heard of before professional baseball. So I would think that I was consistent in numbers, but I got a lot better with the level of play, if that makes sense. Like I learned so much about the actual art of hitting.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, how were you able to maintain your being true to yourself as a hitter and the hitter that you were, and at the same time absorb the new knowledge that they're giving you? Because that can also be a very delicate thing to handle.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to coaches. So Donnie Ecker was my hitting coach in low A, and he's now, I think he's the big league hitting coach with the Giants now. But he flew through the system and he knew things that I've never even heard of. And he got in on the analytics, and he did such a good job of teaching different things to different people, because sometimes when people have a cookie cutter approach to teaching hitting, it can work with some people and not work with other people. And I think that that's when you can get in trouble. And that also makes hitters very stubborn and unwilling to learn things because it didn't work. But he could look at swings and tell them what would work for them, and then say it in a way that works in the hitter's mind, which is really unique and cool. So I think that a lot of the credit goes to my coaches, you know.
What was it like jumping from organization to organization, from the Cardinals to the Diamondbacks? And was there a big shift and adjustment that you had to make going from one organization to another? Because organizations can have different philosophies as they pertain to hitting or pitching or what have you. What was the transition like for you?
I really liked both organizations. I think that they're pretty different, but I really like the Cardinals. I love the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks are probably a little more analytical than the Cardinals were. And that also could be, I was in lower levels with the Cardinals, and I don't know if that's how the Diamondbacks run their lower levels, but in the upper levels with the Diamondbacks, they're a little more analytical. So I don't know if it's really the difference in organizations or just difference in levels I was in, but I kind of liked getting to the Diamondbacks and having heat maps and all that stuff readily available, because I like to try to dissect that stuff, you know.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about the Diamondbacks. So last year, your first season with the D-backs, you started Jackson, you come to Reno. 21 homers in 68 games in Reno, which is outstanding, obviously. There also comes with it the stigma of that happening at Greater Nevada Field and in the PCL with the ball being the way it is and the altitude being what it is. I asked this to Kevin Crone last week, and I'll ask you, is there a mind game you have to play with yourself in terms of the approach when you hit in the PCL? Because there is a tendency, I think, when you get into these ballparks as a hitter, you hit it high and let it fly, and you know you're going to hit the home runs, but consistency is also pretty big. Is there a mind game you play with yourself to keep that level of consistency while still getting the power in there?
I don't think it's a mind game. I think that I'm conscious of the angles I'm setting. And there are definitely some angles I'll set with my swing at Greater Nevada Field that I wouldn't set in the Florida State League, you know, because you saw how the ball flies there and it probably wouldn't work. But I think you don't change. Like you can't really change what you're good at. You can't change what got you there. So I think that you might change a few things. I mean, it's the same thing as if the wind's blowing 100 miles per hour in, you know, you have to kind of switch your mindset, or a pitcher throwing away, but none of that really changes what you do, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of both, you know, don't get too far away from what got you there, but also be smart enough to make an adjustment of the spot you're at.
Can you kind of expand on the angle of your swing, what you were talking about, and take us a little deeper into that? Because that's fascinating to me.
Yeah. So I just think that, so like, let's say the Florida State League, for example, I probably, if we looked at the analytics, my swing would be a little flatter because a lot of those balls we played at Roger Dean. I don't know if you're familiar with.
That's the ballpark that I grew up. I had my first season working in baseball, Roger Dean, with the Jupiter Hammerheads and Palm Beach Cardinals. I'm very familiar with it.
Yeah. So you know that the ball does not want to go out there. No. I mean, you have to absolutely get it. So to just keep ripping balls in the air it's, You can do it if you want, but a lot of them will be caught, you know? So I was still trying to do damage because I think that that's the way baseball is. You have to try to extra base hit, they score runs, you know? So I'm still trying to shoot gaps. I'm still trying to do damage, but I'm not trying to hit the ball directly up, you know? And there are some times in Reno where it's like, I can change my sights a little bit. And if I hit a ball on a maximum angle, let's say 30 degrees to center field, like it could be a home run, you know, and there were balls that I hit off the hitter's eye that in Roger Dean were probably going to be out. So I think that just being conscious of those angles is important.
Do you consider yourself a power hitter?
Yeah, I do.
I like that answer because I've asked guys that point blank too when they put up the type of numbers you have, guys you wouldn't consider to be power hitters, like say Chad Pinder, who I covered for a while, and you know, it's just funny to see how, and interesting to see how players perceive themselves when you put up those types of numbers in a spot as a second baseman or wherever you're playing, where people aren't expecting power from that position. But why do you consider yourself a power hitter?
I think that it's just, I've always tried to do damage. I've always been a hitter. That's just been who I've been, you know? And I think that it adds value to be a power hitting second baseman. I think that a lot of the success I've had is because they kind of value what you do and also where you play, you know? So if you can swing it like a corner outfielder a little bit and still play in the middle and then have the option to maybe play other positions, I think that that's pretty valuable. So I think that, like, I want to be looked at as a power hitter. I want to be looked at as an offensive player, you know, that can still play defense in the middle of the field if I have to. So I think, I don't know, I just feel like I've always been that guy. So,
but you know, it's funny, I bring up Chad Pinder, and it just literally now resonated with me that you're kind of similar in terms of the makeup where you're playing. And when I covered Chad in Stockton, he was playing in the middle of the infield and he could always hit. They just didn't know where they were going to play him. And as Chad went up to the big leagues, you know, he was open to playing pretty much anywhere they wanted him to play. Yeah. That's maybe kind of an issue with you, or is that they don't know where they're going to play you per se in the big leagues, but are you open to playing anywhere on the diamond that they want you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would play outfield, infield, catcher, and I'd pitch if they want me to, you know, anything to get me there.
Speaking of, when do you hope to make that jump, and what do you think it's going to take for you to get to the next level? I mean, you're right on the precipice, but is there something in your mind that you could do to push you over the edge?
So this year is for the when. This year is, I mean, we're gonna have to see the PA and the MLB how they argue this out. But I mean, if this was a normal year, I would have thought that this would have been the year I would have made the jump. And to change, I mean, I think that I continue to just get better at everything that I try to do. But I had success in Reno, and I think that if I came back and continued to do what I did in Reno, and then just, I mean, the next year you go to a level, it's always going to be a little bit easier. So I think that if I just continued to do what I was doing in Reno, I would get the call sooner than later, you know.
I'm hoping, we're all hoping that for you, Andy. And thanks so much for joining us. But before I let you go, a little trivia. Can you name the most prominent big leaguer right now coming out of Indiana State? I have one in mind. There might be another one, but
Sean Manaea, probably.
Yeah, that's the one I had. That's the one I had too. I was racking my brain before we came on. I was like, I know there's an Indiana State guy in the back of my mind, and it was obviously Manaea. So
yeah,
doing good things, and we hope you're doing good things soon too. Hang in there, man, and hopefully you get your crack soon, and hopefully we're all back soon. But we appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You got it, man. Aces infielder Andy Young will be back with more Aces Loaded podcast after this.
Thank you for being our superhero. Thank you for loving our community. Thank you for being our rock star. Thank you for being our heroes.
Hey, Renowned crew. We know you're out there working hard and keeping everybody healthy, and those of us in IT want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Nevada heroes.
We are clapping for our respiratory units. Keep fighting the good fight. Lots of
We just wanted to take a minute out of our day to say thank you so much for the work that you are doing.
We love you.
And we're thinking of you.
We're thinking of you. Go, Dr. Go!
Looking for more content? Check out RenoAces.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter, read player, coaches, and organizational stories, shop our online store, and more. Now back to the Aces Loaded podcast.
Back to close out the Aces Loaded podcast. I want to thank Andy Young for joining us. Phenomenal season that he had. Not only phenomenal season, but a phenomenal career to this point. And we certainly hope that baseball comes back and that he can take that next step, because he's right on the brink. Also want to thank David Calvert, the outstanding photographer for the Reno Aces, the only one they've ever had. And so he's got all the photographs going back to the inception, I would imagine. And talk about being not only a photographer but a historian. David, I'd imagine that you could pretty much put a photo to any memory that anybody might have at Greater Nevada Field, which is something only you in the universe can say.
Yeah, I've missed some games, and I definitely remember the ones that I missed if something big happened. But, just yesterday was the anniversary of Armando Galarraga's almost perfect game. And I'm like, you know what? He pitched for us in 2011, and I'm pretty sure I photographed a start. It turns out he pitched on July 3rd, so it was our 4th of July weekend game. And I found a couple of photos, and I shared the Athletic article about him, and I put one of the photos up there, and it was just like, it's cool to be able to go back and look at the team's history like that. And I've definitely seen a lot of baseball games. It's like 300 plus, almost 400 baseball games.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And Armando Galarraga, also known as the Jim Joyce game. That was the blown call at first base when Armando was with the Detroit Tigers.
Yep.
where can people go to check out some of your photos if they need a baseball fix?
Yeah, so calvertphotography.com is my website. But honestly, I'm a big Twitter guy. So if you want to see, me updating with some unseen photos right now, give me a follow on Twitter. It's Calvert Photo, CALVERT. Yeah, just like the whiskey. And then I'm on Instagram as well. I don't tend to share as much over there, but lots of Aces baseball and lots of baseball related tweets. I'm always sharing articles from some of my favorite baseball writers and photos from some of my favorite baseball photographers as well. So if you want to see what I'm doing, take a look at my Twitter account.
Hey man, great stuff. And thanks for co-hosting this week. And hopefully we get a chance to actually meet in person soon. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You got it, man. For David Calvert, thanks once again to Andy Young. Vince Ruffino's our producer. Zack Bayrouty saying so long. We'll see you next week back here on the Aces Loaded podcast.